When I bought the property on Willow Bend Road, I wasn't just buying a house. I was buying silence. The land sat at the far edge of a suburban development, where neat sidewalks and trimmed hedges gave up their grip to something a little more honest. My backyard sloped down into a shallow ravine, and at the bottom of that ravine ran a narrow creek, clear in spring, lazy in summer, whispering even in winter beneath sheets of ice. The realtor had called it a natural water feature. I called it peace. The neighborhood came with a Homeowners Association, of course. The HOA had rules about mailbox colors, fence heights, holiday decorations, and even how long a trash can could remain visible after pickup. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I dealt with worse. I kept my lawn trimmed, my siding clean, and my truck parked neatly in the driveway. I figured if I didn't bother them, they wouldn't bother me. I was wrong. It started with a letter. Dear homeowner, it began in a tone so artificially polite it almost dripped off the page. The HOA board informed me that they were exploring community enhancement projects to increase property values and neighborhood cohesion. One of the proposed projects involved improving access to the shared natural creek area. Shared. I read that line 3 times. The creek ran through my property. The property lines were clear on the survey. The bank on the opposite side belonged to a strip of common area maintained by the HOA, but the section directly behind my house, where the ravine dipped and the water curved, was mine. The letter stated that the board would be conducting a site visit the following week. No request. No question. Just a statement. I called the HOA office the next morning. Yes, Mr. Carter, the administrative assistant said sweetly. It's just a preliminary look. Nothing to worry about. On my land? I asked. Well, the creek is considered a natural feature benefiting the entire community. That doesn't make it community property. There was a pause. The board will clarify everything at the meeting. I hung up with a bad feeling. The HOA meeting took place in the clubhouse, a beige building that looked like it had been designed by someone afraid of personality. About 20 residents attended. At the front table sat the board. 5 volunteers who took their authority far more seriously than their unpaid titles required. Linda, the president, led the discussion. As many of you know, she began, our neighborhood prides itself on walkability and outdoor enjoyment. We've received several requests from residents who would love easier access to the creek for walking trails. I raised my hand. Yes, Mr. Carter. Linda said, are we talking about the section of creek behind my house? We're talking about a small pedestrian bridge that would connect the common area path to the opposite bank, she replied carefully. It would encourage community interaction. That opposite bank is my property. A few heads turned. Linda smiled tightly. The legal boundaries are somewhat complex. They're not complex, I said. I have a survey. Another board member, Greg, leaned forward. The creek itself is a natural waterway. There are easements in place for maintenance. Maintenance isn't the same as building a bridge. Murmurs spread through the room. Linda cleared her throat. No final decision has been made. We'll consult legal counsel. I left before the meeting ended. 3 weeks later, I came home from work to find tire tracks carved into my backyard. At first, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn and ended up at someone else's house. But there it was, my porch, my fence, my truck in the driveway. And beyond the slope, near the creek, stood a half-built wooden structure. I dropped my bag and stormed down the hill. 2 men in hard hats were setting posts into the ground. What the hell is this? I shouted. One of them glanced up. Bridge installation. On whose authority? HOA, the other said, shrugging. I felt heat rise into my face. This is private property. They exchanged a look. We've got paperwork. Show me. The document they handed over was a copy of an HOA board resolution authorizing the project. It referenced an assumed access easement. Assumed. I called the police. The responding officer listened patiently as I explained the situation. He reviewed the document and then my property survey, which I had thankfully kept in a folder in my office. After studying both, he turned to the workers. Unless you can provide proof of a recorded easement granting construction rights, you need to stop. They packed up their tools. The half-finished bridge skeleton remained like a splinter in my backyard. The next morning, I received another letter. This one wasn't polite. The HOA claimed that I had interfered with a community-approved project and that any delays would result in financial penalties assessed to my account. They attached a legal opinion from their attorney arguing that the creek constituted a shared natural resource and that limited construction was permissible. I hired my own lawyer. 2 weeks and several billable hours later, we sent a response. It included a certified copy of my property survey, zoning documents, and a demand that the HOA cease any attempt to enter my land without written permission. Silence followed. For a while, I should have known they wouldn't give up. One Friday evening, I left town to visit my sister. I returned Sunday afternoon to find the bridge completed. Not half-built. Completed. They had worked fast, likely on Saturday morning. The structure was simple but sturdy. Pressure-treated lumber, railings on both sides, anchored posts on either bank. It spanned my creek like a bold statement. A few neighbors were already walking across it. I stood there, staring. Something inside me shifted from anger to resolve. If they believed they could build on my land without permission, they were about to learn otherwise. Monday morning, I called my lawyer again. They finished it, I said. There was a long sigh on the other end. Do you want to file for an injunction? How long would that take? Weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime, it stays. I looked out the window at strangers strolling through my backyard. What are my rights? I asked quietly. As the property owner, he said carefully, you have the right to remove unauthorized structures built on your land. But document everything. That was all I needed. I rented a flatbed trailer and borrowed a friend's tools. Tuesday at dawn, I walked down to the creek with a pry bar and a socket wrench. The first bolt came loose with a metallic groan. A jogger approached the bridge and stopped. What are you doing? She asked. Removing trespass, I replied. Word spread quickly. By noon, 2 board members had arrived. You can't do this. Greg shouted. I can, I said calmly. It's on my property. Linda pulled out her phone. We'll call the police. Please do. When the officer arrived, different from the first one, he reviewed the documents I handed him. He turned to the board members. Without a recorded easement, this is private land. He's within his rights. Linda's face went pale. By sunset, the bridge lay in pieces stacked neatly on the trailer. The next morning, I drove to a local salvage yard. The owner, a grizzled man with grease permanently embedded in his fingernails, eyed the load. Pressure treated, he said. Still good. Make me an offer. He named a number. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to make a point. I accepted. As the lumber disappeared into the yard, I felt lighter. The HOA sent one final letter. It accused me of destroying community property and demanded reimbursement for construction costs. My lawyer responded with a single paragraph. The structure was unlawfully erected on private property without consent. Its removal was within the owner's legal rights. Any further claims will be met with counterclaims for trespass. That ended it. The board quietly abandoned the project. The path leading to the creek remained unfinished on the common area side, stopping awkwardly at the bank. Neighbors avoided eye contact for a while. Some were angry. Others, I later learned, secretly admired what I'd done. A year later, at the annual meeting, Linda did not run for re-election. Spring returned. The creek flowed as it always had, indifferent to human arguments. No footsteps crossed it. No strangers wandered my yard. One evening, I carried a folding chair down to the bank and sat listening to the water. I hadn't set out to start a fight. I had simply wanted what I'd paid for. My land, my privacy, my quiet. Sometimes people mistake politeness for weakness. The HOA had assumed I would grumble, but comply. They believed their collective authority outweighed individual ownership. They were wrong. The bridge had lasted less than 72 hours. The lesson, I hoped, would last much longer. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold across the creek surface, I realized something. The real victory wasn't the scrap money or even the legal win. It was the silence. And in that silence, with nothing but the sound of water over stone, I finally had what I'd bought the property for in the first place.
Peace.